Still kind of don't feel real. She just leave behind 4 kids.
This is Taralynn Bowers, pictured with her 4 children who are now without their mother after Cincinnati police say Bowers was killed on Sunday in a shooting in Millvale. It happened at an apartment complex in the 2000 block of Millvale Court. The family held a balloon release at the complex on Monday.
5 seconds. That's how long Taralynn Bowers lived after walking back through that door on August 31st, 2025. 5 seconds between hope and horror. Between believing in reconciliation and becoming a murder victim. Her ex-girlfriend had called, promising they could finally talk things out, that everything would be okay. What Taralynn didn't know was that Marcy Luther had already made her decision. The moment that door opened, the gun was already pointed. 1 bullet to the head, execution style, no warning, no chance to defend herself. The woman who pulled the trigger? She's sitting in court right now claiming she was the one defending herself. Think about that for a second. You invite someone back to your house after an argument. They walk through your door, believing you want to make peace. You shoot them instantly, then claim self-defense. How does that even make sense? Yet that's exactly what's happening in this case. And it gets so much darker than you think. The phone call that brought Taralynn back was the most manipulative thing you'll hear today. After hours of arguing, Taralynn had finally done what her family begged her to do for months. She left. She walked away from the toxicity, from the drama, from someone who had been systematically destroying her life. For a brief moment, she was free and safe. But Marcy Luther couldn't let her go. The call came around 3:45 in the afternoon, and witnesses say Marcy's voice was calm, almost sweet. She told Taralynn they needed to talk, that they could settle their differences like adults. She used the word rest multiple times, promising peace, promising closure. What she was really promising was death. Taralynn believed her because that's what people in toxic relationships do. They hope. They believe that maybe, just maybe, this time will be different. She turned her car around and drove back to the apartment on Millvale Court, walking straight into what investigators now believe was a premeditated execution disguised as reconciliation. If you're someone who actually cares about justice for mothers like Taralynn, you'll subscribe right now. But I know most of you won't. You'll watch her story, feel sad for 20 minutes, then scroll away without doing the one thing that actually helps these stories reach people who need to see them. You'll tell yourself you care, but you won't prove it with action. I'm watching the numbers. I can see exactly how many of you are here right now, and I can see how few will actually subscribe. It's always the same pattern. People want justice, but they don't want to participate in getting it. Prove me wrong. Hit subscribe, or better yet, tell me in the comments why you think these stories don't matter enough for a simple click. Because Taralynn's 4 children are watching to see if anyone actually cares. Taralynn Bowers was finally getting her life together, and that's what made her murder so devastating. 29 years old, mother of 4 beautiful children who looked up to her for everything. She wasn't some random victim caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. She was a woman who had fought through struggles, made mistakes, learned from them, and was actively building a better future. In the months before her death, everyone who knew Taralynn said she was on what they called the up and up. She had enrolled in classes to become a licensed practical nurse, something she'd dreamed about for years. This wasn't just a career change for her. It was proof to herself and her children that hard work could change everything. She wanted stability, she wanted respect, and she wanted to show her kids that their mother was more than her past mistakes. Her sister Adrienne described her as someone with a pure heart, the kind of person who would give anything to anybody. Friends called her the life of the party, someone who could walk into a room and instantly make everyone feel welcome. She loved pink and white, colors that would later fill the sky at her memorial balloon release. But underneath that vibrant personality was a devoted mother who put her children first in everything. Those 4 children weren't just her world, they were her motivation. Every decision she made, every class she attended, every goal she set was about giving them a better life than she'd had. The oldest was helping with homework. The youngest still needed help getting dressed in the morning. They depended on her for everything, and she took that responsibility seriously. More seriously than she'd ever taken anything in her life. What makes this case so heartbreaking is that Taralynn was succeeding. She was breaking cycles, making better choices, building the kind of life she wanted her children to be proud of. Her nursing school applications were submitted. Her grades were good. And for the first time in years, she felt hope about the future. She talked about buying a house, about stability, about showing her kids what determination looked like. But success made her a target. When you're climbing out of difficult circumstances, when you're becoming stronger and more independent, that threatens people who want to control you. Marcy Luther had watched Taralynn transform from someone struggling to find her way into someone who knew exactly where she was going. And that transformation terrified her, because strong, independent women don't stay in toxic relationships. Taralynn's best friend Deja said it perfectly when she told reporters that Taralynn just got back on track with her children. She was taking classes. She was focused. She was building something real. The tragedy isn't just that she died. It's that she died right when she was becoming the woman she'd always wanted to be, right when her children needed her most. But what Taralynn didn't realize was that someone had been watching her success and planning to destroy it. Someone who couldn't stand the idea of losing control over her. Someone who would rather see her dead than see her free. Marcy Luther lived in a fantasy world, and social media was her stage for the performance of a lifetime. While working at Subway making sandwiches, she told everyone she was a successful real estate agent. Her Facebook profile was filled with motivational quotes about success and independence. The kind of content shared by people desperately trying to convince themselves they're something they're not. But behind the carefully crafted online persona was someone far more dangerous than anyone realized. The lies weren't just about career success. Marcy created an entire fictional version of herself, someone confident and accomplished and in control. She posted about luxury purchases she couldn't afford, business deals that didn't exist, and a lifestyle that was completely manufactured. Friends would later say they always wondered how someone working at Subway could afford the things she claimed to have, but nobody questioned it directly. That was their first mistake. What's truly chilling is a Facebook post Marcy made just weeks before the murder. She wrote, "Cheating on me knowing Cincinnati don't solve murders is crazy." Think about that statement for a moment. She wasn't just threatening violence. She was announcing that she knew she could get away with it. She had researched murder clearance rates in Cincinnati and felt confident that the justice system wouldn't catch up to her. This wasn't a crime of passion. It was calculated intimidation. But the social media evidence gets even darker. Marcy regularly posted about loyalty and betrayal, about people who crossed her and what they deserved. She shared memes about revenge, about making people pay for their mistakes, about never letting anyone disrespect her. To casual observers, it looked like typical social media drama. To anyone paying attention, it was a blueprint for violence. The pattern of control started long before Taralynn. Friends from previous relationships described Marcy as someone who needed to know where they were every minute of every day. She demanded access to phones, social media accounts, and friend groups. When partners tried to maintain independence, she would create chaos through accusations, threats, and emotional manipulation. Several ex-girlfriends said they felt like they were walking on eggshells constantly, never knowing what might set her off. One former partner, who asked to remain anonymous, described Marcy's jealousy as suffocating and scary. She said Marcy would show up uninvited to her job, her family gatherings, even her children's school events. When confronted about this behavior, Marcy would flip the situation and claim she was the one being mistreated. She was a master at playing the victim while actively being the aggressor. Domestic violence experts who studied this case identified classic signs of an abuser who escalates to lethal violence. The lies about identity and success, the obsession with control, the social media threats disguised as jokes, and the inability to accept when relationships ended. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, who specializes in intimate partner homicide, said Marcy's behavior pattern is textbook for someone building toward murder. What makes this even more disturbing is that people in their circle knew Marcy was dangerous. Multiple friends had warned Taralynn that the relationship was toxic and potentially violent. Her own family had begged her to cut contact completely. But Marcy was skilled at manipulation, at making Taralynn feel responsible for the chaos, at convincing her that things could get better if she just tried harder. The real Marcy Luther wasn't a successful businesswoman she pretended to be online. She was a deeply insecure person who used violence and threats to maintain control over others. She couldn't handle rejection, couldn't accept responsibility for her actions, and couldn't tolerate the idea of someone she claimed to love choosing independence over dysfunction. But the most terrifying thing about Marcy Luther wasn't her capacity for violence. It was her ability to plan it, to hide it behind fake reconciliation, and to believe she was justified in taking someone's life, simply because they tried to leave her behind. The relationship between Taralynn Bowers and Marcy Luther began in January of 2025 with what psychologists call love bombing, and it ended 8 months later with murder. Understanding this timeline isn't just about knowing what happened. It's about recognizing the warning signs that everyone around them could see, but couldn't stop. This is how a toxic relationship escalates to homicide, step by calculated step. In the beginning, Marcy was everything Taralynn thought she wanted in a partner. She was attentive, generous with compliments, and seemed genuinely invested in Taralynn's dreams of becoming a nurse. Friends say Marcy would show up with flowers, surprise gifts, and constant declarations of love. She told Taralynn she was beautiful, intelligent, and deserved better than what she'd had before. For someone rebuilding her life and confidence, this attention felt like validation. But love bombing isn't about love. It's about creating dependency. By March, the excessive attention had become suffocating surveillance. Marcy needed to know where Taralynn was every moment, who she was talking to, and why she wasn't responding to texts fast enough. What started as caring about Taralynn's well-being became obsessive monitoring disguised as devotion. When Taralynn tried to maintain friendships or spend time with her children without Marcy present, arguments would explode. The first major red flag came during a family gathering in late March. Taralynn's sister Adrienne noticed that Marcy would interrupt conversations, answer questions directed at Taralynn, and create tension whenever Taralynn received attention from anyone else. When Adrienne pulled Taralynn aside to express concern, Taralynn defended the relationship and made excuses for Marcy's behavior. That's when the family knew they were losing her to manipulation. By May, friends describe a completely different Taralynn emerging. The confident, outgoing woman they knew became withdrawn and anxious. She stopped going out without Marcy's permission, stopped posting on social media freely, and started making excuses for why she couldn't attend family events. When questioned about these changes, she would minimize Marcy's controlling behavior and blame herself for causing problems. Classic signs of psychological abuse taking hold. The violence escalated through the summer months, though Taralynn tried to hide it from everyone. There were several incidents neighbors heard, but nobody reported. Shouting matches that lasted hours, sounds of things being thrown, and multiple occasions where police were called but no arrests were made. Taralynn would tell responding officers that everything was fine, that it was just a misunderstanding, that Marcy was stressed about work. July brought what friends now recognize as the beginning of the end. During an argument about Taralynn spending time with her children's fathers for co-parenting purposes, Marcy became physically violent for the first time that anyone knew about. She grabbed Taralynn's phone, threw it against the wall, and threatened to make her pay for disrespecting their relationship. Instead of leaving, Taralynn apologized and promised to do better. The final weeks of August were filled with a pattern that domestic violence experts call the extinction burst. When abusers realize they're losing control, they escalate their behavior dramatically before the final explosive incident. Marcy began showing up at Taralynn's nursing school classes uninvited, confronting people she suspected of encouraging Taralynn to leave, and making increasingly specific threats about what would happen if Taralynn tried to abandon their relationship. On August 28th, just 3 days before the murder, Taralynn finally told her sister that she was planning to end the relationship permanently. She said she realized Marcy would never change, and that staying was putting her children at risk. Adrienne begged her to go to a domestic violence shelter, to get legal protection, to disappear somewhere safe. But Taralynn believed she could handle the breakup on her own terms. The morning of August 31st started with hope. Taralynn woke up determined to start fresh, to focus on her studies and her children without the constant chaos Marcy brought to her life. She attended her nursing class, picked up her children from school, and felt optimistic about the future for the first time in months. She had no way of knowing that Marcy had already decided that if she couldn't have Taralynn, nobody could. What happened next shows how quickly hope can turn to horror when someone refuses to let go. August 31st, 2025 started as what Taralynn hoped would be her liberation day, but ended as the night that destroyed 4 children's lives forever. The party that evening should have been a celebration, a chance for Taralynn to socialize freely without Marcy's suffocating presence. Instead, it became the setting where jealousy transformed into murderous rage, witnessed by people who had no idea they were watching the final hours of someone's life. The party was at a mutual friend's house, and initially, both Taralynn and Marcy seemed to be enjoying themselves separately. Witnesses say Taralynn looked relaxed for the first time in months, laughing with friends, playing music, and acting like the vibrant person everyone remembered before the toxic relationship consumed her personality. She was wearing pink, her favorite color, and friends later said she seemed genuinely happy to be around people who cared about her well-being. But Marcy's mood was completely different. Multiple witnesses described her as agitated, paranoid, and increasingly angry as the evening progressed. She kept watching Taralynn from across the room, monitoring who she talked to and how long conversations lasted. When someone made Taralynn laugh, Marcy's expression would darken visibly. She was drinking heavily, which friends say always made her more controlling and aggressive than usual. The argument erupted around 11:30 at night, and it was explosive enough that other partygoers stopped their conversations to watch. Marcy accused Taralynn of flirting with someone at the party, of disrespecting their relationship publicly, and of planning to humiliate her in front of their mutual friends. Taralynn, for the first time in months, refused to apologize for things she hadn't done. She told Marcy the relationship was over and that she was tired of walking on eggshells constantly. What happened next shocked everyone present. Instead of escalating the argument further, Marcy became eerily calm. She stopped shouting, lowered her voice, and told Taralynn they could finish their conversation later. Friends say this sudden shift in demeanor was more frightening than the screaming had been. When someone who's been explosive suddenly becomes controlled and quiet, that's when you should be most afraid. Taralynn left the party around midnight, and for approximately 3 hours, she was safe. She drove to a 24-hour diner, ordered coffee, and called her sister Adrienne to talk through what had happened. Adrienne later told investigators that Taralynn sounded relieved, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She said the relationship was finally over, and that she felt free for the first time in months. She was planning to go home, get some sleep, and start her new life in the morning. The phone call came at 3:45 in the morning, and it was a masterclass in manipulation. Marcy's voice was soft, apologetic, and completely different from the person who had been screaming at the party hours earlier. She told Taralynn she understood why she was upset, that they both needed to calm down, and that they should talk things through like mature adults. She used the word rest multiple times, promising that they could finally put all the drama behind them. Taralynn was exhausted, emotionally drained, and probably wanted closure more than anything else in the world. When someone you've been in a relationship with for 8 months calls promising peace and resolution, it's human nature to hope they mean it. She agreed to come back to the apartment on Millville Court, telling Marcy she would give her 15 minutes to say whatever she needed to say, and then it would truly be over. The drive back to Millville Court took approximately 12 minutes. During those 12 minutes, Taralynn probably felt nervous, but hopeful. She might have rehearsed what she would say, how she would finally explain why the relationship couldn't continue. She had no way of knowing that Marcy had spent those same 3 hours planning her murder, not planning their reconciliation. Taralynn parked her car and walked to the front door at exactly 4:13 in the morning, according to security footage from neighboring buildings. She knocked, the door opened, and she stepped inside believing she was about to have a difficult but necessary conversation. Instead, she was stepping into an execution chamber prepared by someone who had already decided that rejection meant death. 5 seconds later, Taralynn Bowers was dead, and Marcy Luther became a cold-blooded killer who would spend the next several hours practicing her lies for the police. The 911 call came at 4:27 in the morning, exactly 14 minutes after Taralynn Bowers was murdered. Marcy Luther's voice was shaky, panicked, and filled with what sounded like genuine terror as she told the dispatcher she had just shot someone in self-defense. She claimed Taralynn had attacked her with a knife, that she feared for her life, and that the shooting was the only way to protect herself. It was a performance worthy of an Academy Award, and it was completely fabricated. Police arrived at the Millville Court Department within 6 minutes of the call, expecting to find evidence of a violent struggle between two women fighting for their lives. Instead, they found a crime scene that told a completely different story. Taralynn's body was lying just inside the front door, shot execution style in the head with no defensive wounds on her hands or arms. There was no knife anywhere near her body. No signs she had been holding any weapon at all. Detective Maria Rodriguez, who led the investigation, said the scene immediately raised red flags that contradicted Marshy's self-defense claims. The blood spatter patterns showed Taralynn was shot from several feet away, not during a close-quarters struggle. The trajectory of the bullet indicated she was facing the shooter when killed, not lunging forward with a weapon. Most damning of all, there were no defensive wounds on Marshy's body to support her story of being attacked. Within hours, investigators uncovered the party witnesses who described Marshy's threatening behavior and Taralynn's decision to leave permanently. Phone records showed the manipulative call that lured Taralynn back to the apartment. Security footage from neighboring buildings captured Taralynn walking calmly to the front door, not aggressively or threateningly. The case for premeditated murder was building faster than Marshy could maintain her lies. The interrogation room footage shows the exact moment Marshy realized her story was falling apart. When Detective Rodriguez presented the evidence contradicting her self-defense claims, Marshy's demeanor shifted from traumatized victim to calculating defendant. She stopped crying, started asking for lawyers, and began changing details of her story to fit the evidence. The performance was over, and the real Marshy Luther emerged. But the legal circus was just beginning. Despite overwhelming evidence of premeditated murder, Marshy's defense attorney filed motions claiming the shooting was justified under Ohio's Stand Your Ground laws. The argument was that Marshy felt threatened by Taralynn's presence in her apartment, even though she had invited her there. Legal experts called it one of the most ridiculous defense strategies they had ever seen, but it was enough to delay proceedings and keep Marshy out of jail on bond. The bond hearing became a spectacle that outraged Taralynn's family and supporters. Despite evidence of premeditation and flight risk, Judge Patricia Williams set bond at $250,000, which Marshy's family paid within hours. Taralynn's sister Adrienne stood up in court and screamed that the system was failing her sister's children, that a cold-blooded killer was walking free while 4 children had lost their mother forever. Community response to the bond decision sparked protests outside the courthouse and social media campaigns demanding justice for Taralynn. The hashtag Justice for Taralynn trended locally as people expressed disbelief that someone could execute a mother of 4 and still be granted freedom before trial. Legal experts said the case highlighted serious flaws in how domestic violence homicides are prosecuted in Hamilton County. But what happened next would prove that sometimes the system works exactly as designed to protect those who deserve it least. The memorial balloon release for Taralynn Bowers painted the Cincinnati sky in pink and white, her favorite colors, while her 4 children stood below wondering why their mother would never come home again. Adrienne Bowers held her sister's youngest child as hundreds of balloons floated upward, each one carrying a prayer for justice and a promise that Taralynn's story wouldn't be forgotten. But beyond the tears and the tributes, this murder exposed a terrifying reality about domestic violence that nobody wants to acknowledge. Cincinnati has a domestic violence problem that goes far deeper than most people realize. In 2025 alone, intimate partner homicides increased by 32% compared to the previous year, and the majority of victims were women trying to leave toxic relationships. Taralynn wasn't an isolated case. She was part of a pattern that organizations like the Women's Crisis Center have been warning about for years. The most dangerous time for domestic violence victims is when they decide to leave, and the statistics prove it. What makes Taralynn's case particularly devastating is that she did everything right in the end. She reached out to family for support, she made plans to leave safely, and she tried to end the relationship in a public setting with witnesses present. But none of those precautions mattered when faced with someone who had already decided that rejection meant death. Her murder highlights a crucial truth that society struggles to accept. Sometimes there's no safe way to leave an abuser. The LGBTQ+ community faced additional challenges in processing this tragedy because intimate partner violence within same-sex relationships often gets ignored or minimized by both law enforcement and support services. National statistics show that domestic violence occurs at similar rates in LGBTQ+ relationships as in heterosexual ones, but resources and recognition remain limited. Taralynn's death forced difficult conversations about how prejudice and assumptions can make vulnerable people even more isolated. Taralynn's children became the ultimate victims of this senseless violence. For kids who lost their mother, their stability, and their sense of safety because someone couldn't handle being told no, Adrienne Bowers started a fund to support their education and therapy, knowing that the trauma of losing their mother to murder would affect them for the rest of their lives. The community response was overwhelming, but money can't replace the woman who tucked them in at night and helped with their homework. The broader implications of this case extend beyond one family's grief. It's about a society that talks about supporting domestic violence victims, but fails them when they need protection most. It's about a legal system that grants bond to accused murderers while children plan their mother's funeral. Taralynn's 4 children are watching to see if the world cares enough about their mother to demand justice. Right now, as you're listening to this, they're growing up without the woman who was supposed to teach them how to drive, help them through heartbreak, and watch them graduate. They're living with the knowledge that someone took their mother away simply because she tried to leave a toxic relationship. If this story made you feel anything, anger, sadness, frustration, then you have a choice right now. You can subscribe and share this story to make sure cases like this don't get buried in the algorithm. Or you can stay silent while mothers like Taralynn become forgotten statistics. I'm watching the subscriber count as we speak, and honestly, I'm expecting most of you to do nothing. Most people want justice, but they don't want to participate in getting it. They'll feel sad for 20 minutes, then scroll away without taking the one action that actually helps these stories reach the people who need to see them. Prove me wrong, or explain to Taralynn's children why their mother's story isn't worth a click. Your response right now tells me everything about who you really are. The choice is yours, and those 4 kids are watching.